Good morning, my lovely algebra students, and happy Monday. This is Mrs. Carbajal here. For today's lesson on solving polynomials, I did suggest printing out a foldable that I'm going to go ahead and upload and attach for you. The foldable is kind of complicated to print out, and not everyone has access to a printer. But if you want to go the foldable route, which I'm always a huge fan of, you can print out pages 5 through 10, and under printing options, this is crucial. You have to print along the short edge. Most of our printing always comes out along the long edge, and it has to be double-sided. So if that's something you want to do, go for it. If not, I'm going to be modeling my examples on just pieces of paper in my algebra notebook, so don't stress out about that. And again, none of this is going to be for a grade. This is just stuff that I'm recommending that you follow along. And today is pretty simple, so nothing to stress out about. So let's assume you went the foldable route and you printed out your foldable. Notice how the 3 pages, there's 6 pages, but it's on 3. I put the completing the square on the bottom, graphing in the middle, and quadratic formula on top. And at this point, you know what to do. I've been training you for this for the whole year. When you pull them downwards, you are creating a 6-tab foldable. Now this one was meant to do in class, obviously, and it comes with twice as many. So there's one for you and one for a partner, or if you want a younger or older sibling to follow along with you. Just cut it down the middle and put some staples up at the top, and you are good to go. Today's topic is going to be under factoring right here. So we have a nice place. The rest of these actually are in a different unit, so we're going to come back to them in the next couple days and weeks. So if you care to use this, great. If not, this is where I'm going to be doing my lesson today. So here we go. So solving a quadratic by factoring. So just to quickly recap, a quadratic is one of these expressions here where the degree is 2. The highest degree is going to be 2 or raised to the second power. And we've been working with these for about a month or so here. The major difference with what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be solving, not simplifying. And we can only solve when we have an equation. So you see the examples that I'm starting to give you are set equal to 0. So there's an equal sign, an equation, something to solve for. And we're going to use a vocabulary word or phrase that we have heard about since, I would say about 2nd or 3rd grade here. And it's called the zero product property. That's going to help us doing our solving today. And remember, the zero product property says that if the product of 2 quantities equals 0, or if you were to multiply 2 things together and they equal 0, you can conclude that at least one of those quantities has to equal 0. So let me give you a quick example here. And I'm pulling this example out of your textbook. So if you want to take a look at lesson 6.2, this is kind of a recap of what they're mentioning there. So let's say I have 2 numbers that I care to multiply together, like 5 times 0. Oops, sorry, I knocked my camera. 5 times 0. If I multiply 5 times 0, I know that that product has to be equal to 0. Okay. Likewise, if I decide to multiply 0 times 6, I know that product is 0. So if we know that the answer or the product was 0, we can conclude that one of those terms there, one of those quantities had to be 0. Maybe 1, maybe 2. It's just 1 or more. So I'm going to come over here to the algebra side, and again, in your textbook, it does say if we were to put an algebra twist to this, we can conclude that if you have a product like A and B, so if you multiply 2 variables such as A and B, and you know that together they are equal to 0, then you know that either A or B is equal to 0. So then either A is equal to 0 or B is equal to 0. We can conclude that because of those products are equal to 0. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and try solving a quadratic right now via factoring. So right here I have my first example. I just kind of pulled this out of thin air. It's not in the foldable. It's just an extra bonus example. So by now, we're kind of pros at this here. If we were to factor this trinomial, we know that the two factors that would satisfy this situation are going to be 8 and 6. And again, if I'm trying to create a negative sum and a negative product, I know that 8 has to be the negative and 6 has to be positive. And what's crucial here is that we do not forget to write equal to 0, because it's no longer an expression, it is an equation. So we're going to go back to our good friend, the zero product property. And remember, if the product of these two quantities is 0, one of them has to be 0. So what we're going to go ahead and do is take a moment, and we're going to solve for 0, or assume that they are equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and say this quantity is either equal to 0 or this quantity is equal to 0. And again, we can do this quite quickly. I'm going to add the opposite, and I know that I have x equals 8 here on the left-hand side. Again, if I were to solve, I've got to circle out my zeros, x equals negative 6. So either of those two are an answer. Another way that we can show our answer is we can also write this as x equals 8, comma, negative 6. So you can list out all your answers here. It's really important, however, to not put parentheses around them because they're not a coordinate. It's not a particular point on a plane. It's just saying that either of these could be the solution to this quadratic equation. Okay, so that was kind of our bonus example. I'm going to go on to an example number 2. If you are following along in the foldable, this is basically the example number 1 I just pulled there. We'll take a look at the other examples on another day, maybe tomorrow. Okay, so moving a little quicker here, we know that if we were to simplify this, if we were to factor it rather, we have, here we go, we have the quantity of x. Sorry, my husband just came home and he's probably announcing to me that he has food, which I'm really excited about. So we're looking for two numbers that when we multiply them together, we get 36, but combine them to get 9. So we got to think about this one. Is it going to be 1? Thank you, babe. It's going to be 1 and 36. It could be 2 and 18. It could be 3 and 12. It could be 4 and 9. It could be 6 and 6. So I'm thinking right here off the top of my head, I think it's got to be 12 and 3. So I got to think about that one. 12 and 3. If we were to go ahead and multiply these together, we know that they're negative, but if we were to combine them, they're going to be positive. So therefore, bam, 12 has to be positive, 3 has to be negative. Again, if I were to set those two equal to 0, each of those quantities equal to 0 using the zero product property, it's going to look like this. Adding the opposite, I know that x is equal to negative 12. And then over here, adding the opposite, we know that we have a quantity that says x equals 3. Again, that is fine enough. Those are our solutions, our possible solutions, or you could also list them out. So x equals negative 12 and 3. So that's it. We've been working on this for quite some time. You should feel pretty comfortable right now in factoring. And it's just that last section of going ahead and solving each quantity for 0. Okay. At this point, I would highly, highly recommend that you would take a look at the textbook that you have in section 16.2. I put it in the learning studies schedule. I would really recommend focusing on independent practice on page 577 and take a look at problems 11 to 21. If you feel good about those, then you would be ready for tomorrow's lesson, which is very similar. I hope you guys have a very nice Monday and take care, you guys. Miss you guys. Bye-bye.